Assurance Needs. The Computer Software Assurance Initiative from the FDA, as was mentioned in a previous podcast, flips the paradigm around. The old CSV way was documentation, testing activities, assurance needs, and critical thinking. With CSA, it's flipped around to put critical thinking first and then assurance needs, subsequently testing activities and documentation. But what is assurance needs? In this podcast, we're going to explore what these assurance needs are so that you can employ CSA, Computer Software Assurance, making sure that you cover all of the aspects of this paradigm. If you look at information that explains what computer software assurance is, it first starts off with identifying an intended use of the system, which is important. And obviously, the intended use is explained essentially in the user requirements of the system. And you need to know if the system, the feature, operation, function directly impacts the safety, the quality, or the integrity of the system that you're working with. And collectively, I'm using the term system, but that could be equipment, computer systems, etc. in a validation arena. But in this case, we're talking about computer software validation, or specifically the new paradigm, computer software assurance. After you identify the intended use, then you determine a risk-based approach. And that's where you will identify specifically where the high-risk areas are of the system. And if they're not high risk, then are they medium or low risk? But most attention should be placed on high risk that can directly impact safety or quality, with a primary focus on patient safety. Then, after you do that, you can determine when a failure of these identified elements will cause an impact, a high-risk impact in these areas. And the high-risk features, operations, or functions that have been identified are those that will require the most rigorous assurance effort and objective evidence. And I'm paraphrasing this from a presentation that was given coming from the FDA's Case for Quality, the Case for Quality Program Manager. So again, determining the risk-based approach, you identify what the risk is and potential failures, and can those failures impact the quality, safety of a device, a product, a process, a system, etc. And the need is to establish the appropriate risk-based assurance activities. So let's dive into what are the appropriate assurance activities that need to be addressed, specifically with a focus on the high-risk areas first that require the most rigorous effort of validation. When we think of assurance, you can go to the definition of the word, and the root of the original definition of the word goes back to reassurance. So if validation is to demonstrate that a system performs as intended, consistently performs as intended, then the assurance or reassurance is that the way that you go about and do the validation is reassuring you that A, the validation is being done properly. You are proving the system performs as intended, as originally stipulated in the user requirements, elaborated and functional, and then further elaborated down to detailed design. But that is where the intended use starts, with the user requirements. And you're going to assure that those requirements are met and that those requirements have been validated. So when you deliver and use the system, then you're making sure, you're reassuring that that system is not going to cause any harm, that the results of the operation of that system in performing the activities is going to do so in a manner in which does not jeopardize quality or safety, again, with patient safety being the primary concern. The quality assurance department is a clue for where that assurance comes from. After all, that department is to assure the overall quality of the entire organization. And that department is focused on one aspect, which is compliance. But in our industry, we may have lost sight of quality by being too focused on compliance. I've written about this and talked about this before, and it's, do we have a compliance-centric mindset and at the expense of quality? Have we lost sight of quality? Has quality assurance focused too much on regulatory requirements and compliance? And you may comply specifically with how you interpret the letter of the law or spirit of the law as it relates to the regulatory requirements, but the end result is you're not necessarily delivering a quality product. So true quality assurance assures that quality is delivered. Quality of the system, the operation, quality of the intended use of the system, quality in that the risks don't become realized and actually jeopardize the product or patients or operators, etc. We'll focus in on the quality assurance department and take a dive into, are you as a quality function more concerned about compliance-centrics, and not focused enough on quality-centric? A good way to assess if you have a compliance-centric mindset, too focused on the regulation at the expense of quality, is how you go about and operate your business. If people feel that they must submit things a certain way, otherwise that'll get rejected by quality, so therefore they have to bend to quality's requirements, otherwise they won't get a signature, then that is starting to swing towards the compliance-centric mindset. And again, that mindset is based upon an interpretation of the regulation itself. The flip side of that is to actually have a quality-focused, a quality-centric, a quality culture. By doing that, you will ensure that what is delivered is quality, and quality will comply with the regulation. So if everybody has this quality mindset and a quality culture is ingrained inside of them, then everybody at every level of the organization is going to produce quality requirements, quality validation scripts. The quality assurance department is the overarching umbrella of quality throughout the entire organization to assure that quality transcends all levels of the organization, and the resultant output of these departments and functions is a quality product, a service, etc. So what is the assurance needs? It is, how do you assure quality? And that comes in several aspects as it relates to validation. When we look at assurance needs of validation, we touched upon the risk assessment process at the very beginning, which is vital, because that's where you'll identify where you need to focus the most effort, high risk, and the least effort, low risk. The medium risk is up to discretion. What do you need to do to address the medium risk? It's neither high or low. It's in the middle. So you'll have to use a team of subject matter experts to address those medium risks to see how much is enough or how much, how little is too little. So where is that balance to make sure the medium is tested appropriately? High risk is the highest degree of rigor. Low risk, well, if it's truly low risk, then if a problem happens, there will be no impact because it's low risk. And if there is an impact with a low risk item, then you didn't assess the risk right. So risk assessment is extremely important at the very beginning to figure out where you're going to exercise the most rigor in the validation initiative and not waste time on activities that aren't as risky. So therefore, you'll have more time to focus in on the high risk areas. The other area of assurance needs is to leverage the available tools that you're going to be using to perform the validation. And technology has advanced to the point to where we have a lot of available tools to us. We have automated testing, and then with computer software assurance, it opens up the door for ad hoc or exploratory testing, which is much different from the way that the traditional CSV approach is, where we wrote out a script and the script would have the instructions, the expected result, the actual result, pass, fail, comments, signatures, etc. So that's the CSV way, where we literally wrote out painstaking detail, the instruction, the expected result, the actual result, and then the test executor would fill out the actual result to make sure it matched the expected and then sign off as pass or fail. With ad hoc testing, it's different because it's performed in an ad hoc manner. You essentially go into the system and you start performing tests in different areas to see if you could find a problem or break the system. In a previous life, in the .com era, I worked for a company and we were involved with a .com business that involved financial transactions. And when it comes to financial transactions, everybody wants to make sure that that is accurate because money's involved. We should have the same, if not more, degree of effort, rigor that is applied to product quality, safety, patient safety. But unfortunately, sometimes, believe it or not, more focus is put on finance, money, than it is on other areas that may in fact be more important. Hopefully that's not the case, but maybe you've seen that to be true in some situations. So with ad hoc testing in that .com era that I worked in, we would go in and have a team of people go into the system. It was unscripted. Individuals would go in and try to break the system, and guess what? We found bugs prior to releasing the system to production. We found and fixed those bugs right away, and every system has problems. We did have little problems here and there, but we released really good technology that was reliable and it was performing as intended. So in my experience in a previous life, not in the life sciences industry, I could tell you that ad hoc testing works, at least the way we were doing it worked. And then there's exploratory testing that you can do as well. And so these are all assurance needs: ad hoc testing, performance exploratory testing, and it does get into the testing methods, and that is one of the aspect of computer software assurance is the testing activities themselves. But when you're looking at assurance needs, you're looking at how are you going to reassure that the system is tested properly, so that when you get to the testing activities, you're performing the right testing, scripted, such as traditional CSV, exploratory, ad hoc, automated. You're figuring out all of this in the assurance area, and the quality assurance department plays a vital role, because if you're talking about ad hoc, exploratory, or even automated testing, oftentimes the results of that is not something that could be used as objective evidence. So quality assurance, understanding what needs to be done to produce objective evidence that is defensible, needs to assure that the quality of the validation deliverables will provide objective evidence that you could use to defend the system for the ad hoc, exploratory, and unscripted testing, automated testing. And it can be done. It's being done right now. So with the risk, you're identifying what areas to focus in on based upon your risk assessments to reassure that what you're going to be doing adequately test those to avoid the risks altogether, completely eliminate them ideally, or mitigate them to where they're not a risk of concern. And that is what you'll do initially at the beginning, and then you'll approach it to how best can you test these areas. So if you have a really high risk area of a system, then maybe you use a combination of all the different types of testing methods. Maybe you do the CSV approach where it's scripted, expected actual results, and you perform that. In addition, you can do the ad hoc or exploratory testing as well to further reassure that what was done was right, that you didn't miss something in a test script. When you're writing out these detailed test scripts, you can get so focused in on the documentation that you lose sight of what you're actually doing. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And with different reviewers and peer reviewers, you'll catch that. But nothing is perfect. Things can slip through. So using different types of testing is an arsenal that you can draw from, tools that you can use to look at the risk, the operation, the functionality, the demonstration of the performance or intended use of the system. You can do all of that with the different types of testing activities that you approach it with. Then you need to look at the documentation that will result. So what is the objective evidence? What is the adequate validation documentation, or in an electronic system, the results, the records that will be produced that you can present? Now, we're used to a traditional validation package in our industry where we have the plan, the requirements, whether they be user functional or design, the qualification protocols, whether they be installation, operation, performance, or combinations thereof, IQ, OQ, IOPQ, etc. So you have those qualification scripts, which are standard and people know what they are and expect to see those. And if you don't have them, you better have a really good explanation to demonstrate equivalency if you have something different, that this is equivalent to an IQ, OQ, PQ set of qualification scripts. But in the traditional way, once again, IQ, OQ, PQ is pretty common. Then you have the traceability matrix, which pulls all of that together. I refer to it often as the mortar, the glue that holds all of the validation pieces together, because that's what links your requirements to the test. So your requirements, again, is the intended use of the system, and the testing proves that the system performs as intended. I should call out that the different requirements, and many of you already know this, test different things. So the user requirements are based upon the performance, traditionally, and the operational upon the functional, or functional upon operational, and the design upon the installation. So that is the traditional linkage there. And you need to make sure that all of the requirements are appropriately tested based upon the test scripts. And you can augment those test scripts, like I said earlier, with the different types of testing, ad hoc, exploratory, or automated. Then once you complete that, you'll have the sign-offs. Different people review the document, sign off on it. Even the protocols, if they're written, the pre-approval. And if you're writing these automated test scripts, how are you going to assure the quality of those test scripts? And how are you going to control the automated test scripts? It's one thing to write an automated test script and perform the automated testing, but how do you make sure nobody goes in and changes those scripts and you have this false sense of security that the automated test script is in fact testing something adequately, only to find out later that somebody inadvertently or purposefully changed the test script, which had an unforeseen consequence and an outcome where something didn't work when in fact in the previous versions of the test script it had worked. So you have to think of all the different aspects associated with whatever types of testing that you're using, such as even the automated testing. That is the assurance needs. So what is the assurance needs associated with the documentation that will be produced? If you're using an electronic system, what's the assurance that the validation output from the electronic systems is stored securely? Not only does the system store records, data, information securely for its intended use, but if you're using an electronic validation system, that system stores the validation information securely, and data integrity applies all aspects of the data integrity, Alcoa, attributable, legible, original, contemporaneous, accurate, etc., and even Alcoa Plus, consistent, enduring, available. So you'll see that I'm talking about computer software assurance, CSA, but there's a lot that is being drawn from CSV. There's similarities. They're the same. It's just the paradigm is upside down. But if you're like me, when assurance needs was called out, I had to stop and think, what is the assurance needs? And diving into it, reading up on the information, and just based upon experience, yes, having worked in quality assurance, that's what we did in quality assurance. We assured quality was delivered, and how we did that was with procedures. But again, with an electronic system, you can actually take those procedural controls and you can implement them in the system with technical controls. So if you're taking a look at assurance needs of a system and you're using an electronic system to perform that, a lot of times the assurance needs are met by the very electronic system that you have implemented. Assurance needs. We talked about quality assurance and we talked about compliance. It's very frustrating in a typical, traditional, not typical, computer system validation. In that respect, you may have had a situation where you're submitting something and it gets rejected because it wasn't the right template. You're submitting something and a document number or system name was wrong in it and it gets rejected. And the templates change, and the project team or the tech team, they don't understand quality and may say that quality is constantly changing their minds. And it's based, if you submit something to them one day, the next day you submit it and it doesn't get accepted and gets rejected. Or certain people in the department will reject everything and other people won't reject. They'll just sign off on things. So maybe you have seen that actually happen or experienced that, or maybe you're fortunate and that has never been something that has occurred in your professional career. But these problems do exist. On the flip side, the quality assurance department charged with assuring quality has a challenge that things get submitted that don't follow the right procedures, that obvious mistakes are being missed. And so they're getting documents that have to be reviewed because they're not up to the quality standards. So the quality assurance department is charged with assuring quality. But then if you really move away from that compliance centric mindset and work together with the teams to embrace this quality focused culture, then you can make sure that everybody embraces quality, and that when you're producing records, when you're performing automated testing, that you're really taking the right measures to assure that quality is in place. In turn, the validation team assembled to lay out the strategy for the validation is going to assure that all of the quality aspects for the validation are taken into consideration and the end result is the quality standards are met. And the quality assurance department will assure that the right controls, be it procedural, technical, are in place to guarantee, ideally, that quality is assured. And the end result is that you will comply. And if you have high quality and you're in compliance, then when an audit or an inspection happens, it's just verifying good practices. That's the ideal world. The audit should confirm, the inspection should confirm that you are in fact following good practices and processes, and the results are have a high degree of integrity, they're accurate, and the products or services, the transactions, everything that's being performed are of the right standard of quality and in compliance. Computer software assurance has assurance needs as the second step underneath critical thinking. Critical thinking first, and then assurance needs. In this podcast, we've walked through what those assurance needs are, and it's basically what you need to do to prove that you have validated a system to demonstrate it performs as intended, consistent intended performance, and you have the processes in control that prove that you're using the right technologies, techniques, and systems, manual and automated, at the right time, and the objective evidence that's captured from them support the fact that these things were done in a controlled manner. And if they were done with ad hoc exploratory testing, you still have objective evidence to prove that that was done. So in the end, you have reassured everybody that the validation meets or exceeds your quality standards and is in line with the regulatory requirements.